Welcome to HIV The Morning After. I'm Dan Hall. I'm a documentary producer and director. I've spent my entire adult life watching ignorance and prejudice play out around HIV. And frankly, I'm tired of it. And I'm sure many of you are too. This podcast is an attempt to do something about that. Not through lectures or statistics, but by doing what I do best. Interviewing people and letting them tell their own stories. Real voices, lived experiences, no bullshit. These conversations matter, and if you think so too, please rate, review, and share HIV The Morning After. I can make these episodes, but I can't make people listen to them or find them on their algorithms. That bit's down to you. You can reach me at hivthemorningafter@gmail.com. Right then, let's get started. My guest today is Can. He describes himself as a global citizen, and he's of Turkish Kurdish origin and lives here in London. Can has come out twice in his life, once about his sexuality and once about his ethnicity. And now he's navigating a third layer of identity, living with HIV. And he's doing it in a city that celebrates diversity but doesn't always understand it. For this interview, Can's voice has been altered to protect his identity. Can, it's great to meet you. Welcome to HIV The Morning After.
Hi Dan, thanks for having me.
So can you begin by telling us how old you are and tell me about the start of your life? What was it like?
I'm 27. The start of my life, I would say, was a time of transition, because I'm from a country which changed really rapidly in my lifetime. And it also is a country of hidden diversity or oppressed diversity. So as you grow old, you first are taught to how to deny that diversity. But if you carry the diversity in you, then you need to reckon with it, explore it.
Can you explain a bit more about what you mean by that sort of hidden diversity and why that could be a problem?
Yeah, there are many ethnicities in Turkey which we don't openly acknowledge. We know it's all there. Families know within themselves they are part of them. But in the public life, their language, their colors, their art is not openly invited. I think growing up, that was also the case for me. It only changed in my lifetime you could speak Kurdish in public freely. And I come from a Kurdish background from one side of my family, which spoke Kurdish at home, but they didn't. They were too afraid maybe, to teach us Kurdish. So that diversity was there. It was inaccessible to me. It was hidden away, and it was not visible.
So was the very nature of your native language politicized? Was it considered politically offensive, inappropriate, banned?
That, and also divisive, potentially outrageously divisive. Everything was politicized, so you learn to hide parts of your identity. And in my early years, that was pretty much the case for me. It took me 18 years of my life to make peace with my Kurdish identity.
And how did you hide your Kurdish identity?
Oftentimes, it is about being overly apologetic about being Kurdish rather than hiding it. I think your name could give it away, you're Kurdish, your looks, other clues about you that you cannot hide physically, but you're taught to compensate about them by maybe being over nice or maybe over tolerating of hate remarks or other offensive language and policies. I think it's about assimilation, that how you feel it rather than actually being taught to hide or deny it.
It's a thankless question to ask you, but can you give us just a potted idea of where this conflicting relationship has come from. Give us a little bit of an idea of, say, the Kurdish-Turkish history.
I think maybe for the purpose of this podcast, the important thing to know about this is it is not naturally invited or accepted to be publicly Kurdish in Turkey, or maybe nowadays it's changing a little bit, but in the past it was criminalized because the Turkish nation state was formed on the ideals of a new meta-identity that everybody calls themselves Turks, even though they may not be ethnically Turkish, for as long as they spoke Turkish. Even the Armenians, the Greeks, the Arabs, the Circassians, we have a lot of diversity in Turkey. Those ethnic groups were kind of assimilated into a bigger national identity, and it was very forceful. You had to sacrifice a lot from your past and your family ties to be accepted into this new identity.
So on a very practical level, where and how did you grow up? Say, take us to teenage you. Where are you? Who are you growing up with?
I grew up in the capital of Turkey, Ankara. It is a boringly stable place where it's very safe, but also sometimes unmotivating to be a young person. I think knowing from the early ages you're gay and you're from a different mixed ethnic background, you don't want to be outed, you don't want to be bullied. So I went from school to home. I didn't want to interact with the other kids on the street because it felt too real and too exposed.
So then, John, you spoke to us about all your childhood, all your teenage years. You had a sense of you being othered from maybe the world around you, being Kurdish. When did you start to realize that you were othered on a whole different level, which is through your sexuality?
Yeah, I think that sense of othered, the way it manifested in me was wanting to be invisible, not drawing attention, maybe hiding deliberately parts of my identity. So in up to middle school, that was about my Kurdish identity.
And about how old is that? How old is middle school?
Maybe 14, up to 14. And up until that point, it's about how do you hide your outwardly or unapologetically Kurdish. And I found the answer being over-efficient, over-achieving, basically grabbing status and power. Because in Turkey, if you're rich, if you're powerful, or if you're liked enough, those can be redeeming factors of your ethnic complexity. But in middle school, as you hit puberty and maybe you become more conscious of your sexuality, I realized maybe status and power are not enough to get me to my next challenge, which is about my sexuality. Because I think that's where I met with stigma. Regardless of the power or status you have, if you're a gay person in Turkey, regardless of you're Turk or Kurdish or man, woman, you can easily be toppled down on the hierarchy of respect. That sense of being externally exposed or exposable really led me to work hard and fight for a scholarship to go abroad, because I felt I was ever going to be doomed or externally exposed if I stayed in Turkey as a gay man. I thought to recover my sense of freedom and liberation, I had to go abroad.
So you achieved something incredibly impressive. You got yourself a scholarship and you went to the United States and you had a fantastic career mapped out in front of you for which you were pretty confidently heading towards. You had the intelligence and it had the opportunity to head towards that. But then what happened?
I had my master's and job lined up. I had my plans. I had that freedom that I worked so hard to create for myself. And then I thought, okay, it's now my time to be unapologetic about my sexual identity. Then COVID happened. I lost my visa and right to work in the United States. I had to finish school remotely. I went back to Turkey to my parents, and I was again in the same environment, which made me realize those oppressive or restrictive pressures that was so formative in actualizing my identities. But now I was disarmed. I was back to square one at a later age and in a really uncertain world.
So you're in the COVID world now. I'm imagining Ankara's gone into lockdown.
A very oppressive lockdown.
So where were you living your lockdown and what was it like?
With my parents in a 7 square meter flat, and there was this time 3 of us couldn't even go out even momentarily for 34 days straight. And imagine the level of psychosis, collective psychosis in that household. One small offhand remark about gay men, I don't remember if by mom or dad, made me explode and I came out as gay. The world is doomed. People are dying around you. You've been confined like little slaughter animals in this cage for 30 plus days straight on. And you hear something so offensive about yourself from the people who are supposed to love you and care about you the most.
So you're in this apartment and you come out as being gay to your parents, and I don't imagine it's the news they particularly wanted to hear. You come out in this tiny apartment. Now, up to this point, can you describe what your regime was regarding sexual health around HIV? What was happening? What had you been doing up to this point?
I was on PrEP the last 2 years of college, and when the lockdown or the pandemic started, I went to Turkey with only 2 weeks of PrEP left with me. Not that it mattered a lot, because in a lockdown, I even felt criminal hugging my own parents, let alone having sex. Having sex felt like a criminal activity. But yeah, I was then out of PrEP, and there was no PrEP in Turkey. Of course, there is access to it if you're rich or if you live in the biggest cities and if you know this 1 or 2 select elite pharmacies, but it's so expensive. Even doctors don't know about it.
So then you're in the middle of a harsh lockdown, you're on PrEP, but your ability to get PrEP in your hometown is scuppered, and you've only got a certain amount of PrEP left. And can you just help us understand why you couldn't get more PrEP?
PrEP is now a commodity here in a single-payer healthcare system like NHS. And there are sexual health doctors and clinics. In Turkey, we don't have those clinics and we don't have access to PrEP. You may question if it's for moral, political, or cultural reasons, or if it's just too expensive or another priority. I don't know enough to comment on it, but in Turkey, for you to be able to be on PrEP, maybe you need to be in this couple select circles in Istanbul, be really rich, know these pharmacies which can import from abroad without maybe the complex licenses, and you need to be really informed about it. So I don't have any venues to get it. I don't even have any healthcare specialists to talk. Remember, you're also in this environment where people don't know about being on PrEP. So if you were to ask your partner if they're on PrEP, maybe they would ask you what PrEP is.
We're in lockdown and you run out of PrEP. Does this worry you?
It did, up to a certain extent. I think in pandemic, all of us really created human connection. And when you're so deprived of basic restorative touch, if nobody has touched you with care, love, and you're so hungry for intimacy, your risk perception changes. And maybe you start questioning less about being on PrEP or not, or the choice of your sexual partner. I think in the lockdown, all of our understanding of risk perception has shifted.
It's very curious hearing you talk about the need for touch, the need for connection, the need for intimacy. I remember very clearly in the, maybe was it 6 months before PrEP was available? Not on the NHS, but initially at all, because I remember I first used to buy it from abroad because it wasn't available on the NHS. And PEP was already available by then. And I had started to have sex without condoms before PrEP was available. And I started to think, do you know what? I have fucking had sex with condoms since 1992 and it just doesn't feel intimate. And I'm bored of it. I'm fucking bored of it. And so I can totally understand your sense of it's a risk worth taking. And the reason I'm sharing this with you, and I'm sharing this with the people listening, is we mustn't underestimate the human want for connectivity, nor indeed throw moral judgment on that.
I think maybe it's also now time to free ourselves from the hierarchy of stuff about safety of sex, because sex is more about than it being safe or not. It's really about connection, intimacy, anticipation, lust, making peace, creating something with our bodies. I think if we just over focus on making it safe, sometimes we leave not enough time in our quick world of social media and dating apps, enough time for the other parts, the human parts. So I understand why the emphasis on safe sex is there, and I'm 100% pro consent. But I fully agree with you. We need to maybe sometimes take a step back and remind ourselves what sex is about.
And so taking us back to COVID, and you've run out of PrEP, you're in a small apartment with your parents, you've come out to them, the life situation is not easy. When opportunity presents itself to connect with somebody else, you, I think, quite understandably take it.
It was, I think, in between alpha and beta ways. So people were thinking, okay, things are getting better. There were less curfews. And in Istanbul, then I hook up with this guy for the first time in then 8 months. And I don't know why I did ask him, but I asked him if he was on PrEP. And he said yes. And I then chose to have unprotected sex. Did I trust him being on PrEP? No. Don't ask me why I asked him if he was on PrEP, me not myself being on PrEP or caring that much about it. But at deep down, I think I couldn't care. I was really craving for that connection. I think that was a really performative conversation between me and him, that what we were asking each other is, do you miss intimacy? Do you want to have this moment where time freezes and two bodies connect? And then 2 weeks later, I get really ill and I'm feeling really bad because I think, okay, I caught COVID and now I'm bringing it back to my household. My mother and father with comorbidities, they're going to be really impacted about it. I asked them to leave the home because I'm so convinced it's COVID. I'm burning in fever. I feel like a lorry hits me. I cannot even get out of bed. So I fear for their life. I asked them out and I'm alone. Then I go to hospital twice and I get COVID tests, PCRs.
And just to step in there, these hospitals, I imagine, are still filled with COVID patients, PPEs everywhere.
Yeah, you cannot enter if you have a non-COVID symptom, period. Like, you can die from kidney failure. We are literally beyond capacity of our healthcare system. Many people with cancer, they had to skip chemos or surgeries. our hospitals were overfilled by people needing intubation. So I'm convinced it's COVID. But the tests keep getting negative. And I have this really high fever, swollen lymph nodes, and then my gums start to bleed out of a sudden. I feel so lethargic, almost to a point of delusion. And after 2 negative PCR tests for COVID, I then think, okay, this either has to be HIV or hepatitis C. I find this private clinic who accepts non-COVID patients and who could do sexual health tests. And then 2 days later, I get a phone call. The hepatitis C is negative, but the HIV test is sent to the public health authorities. So I knew. I'm alone at home. People who are positive would know what I mean. The first time you're bedstruck with HIV, it really feels horrible in your body. Like, that time you understand, okay, oh shit, now I understand what people have gone through physically in their bodies. I just sit down and cry thinking, okay, I really need to get access to medication because I feel like I'm literally decaying. That sense of not even being able to get out of bed. My neck is totally swollen. I'm like burning with 40 degrees of fever. And I think, okay, how the hell I'm gonna get access to the medication?
I know you mentioned that you'd had unprotected sex quite recently, and so logically it shouldn't have been a surprise. But one of the reasons I was so keen to get you on as a guest, because we're friends outside of this, is I was so struck by your story, because we can hear a million times that people are still continuing to be diagnosed as living with HIV. But I think in truth, culturally, we do think that it is something from the 80s, 90s that sort of affects men of my age, or affects the social lives of men of my age. That it's a bit of an old story. It's a bit of a stale story now. So yours, I thought, was a really fantastic story to share. And thank you for sharing it, because it shows that it is not a stale story from the past.
I actually journaled that day because I felt so alone. You know, I'm back in Turkey, in this flat I grew up in. I've worked so hard to leave, and life puts me back. Now I'm with HIV, in middle of a pandemic. Healthcare system is to its brim. They're not even accepting me as an urgent case. What do I do then? I felt so lonely and journaled, and I actually looked what I journaled this morning before coming here. It was really about failing to protect myself. Because remember, me coming out as a Kurd, it was a story of empowerment. Feeling empowered enough, not be afraid. Then coming out as a gay was a story of freedom, creating a free life where I can liberate myself. Yet this HIV took me back home, neither protected, nor empowered, nor free, and I'm alone. And I thought to myself, what did I do to myself? So I remember then just getting up, saying, okay, what do I think I have lost being positive? And I realized maybe nothing. If I can get access to medication, nothing. But I need to get access to medication. To be strong, I need to trust on myself. I need to make it happen.
But you're in a situation where there's a global pandemic and your country's healthcare system is on its knees. So you're in a situation where you don't know what the ending of this pandemic storyline is. You're already ill. You have arguably tested positive for HIV because already of a break in your healthcare system, because you aren't able to access PrEP, something which in other countries people can. You're very, very ill in this apartment and you're alone. So what happened?
I am put on hold until the public health authorities do a confirmatory test, because that's a procedure in Turkey. They don't necessarily trust the results of a private clinic. They send samples out of my will to a public health authority who does the confirmation tests. And if I'm confirmed, then I can have free access to HIV medication. But it needs to be state confirmed. And you're in state rosters for the rest of your life that you're positive. And it affects everything. For instance, there's mandatory military service in Turkey. HIV-positive men don't do that. So once you're in the system, it's linked to everything.
So you're very, very ill, but I'm guessing at some point you do manage to get access to medication.
I do.
And we're still in the pandemic.
Yeah. So I'm not allowed to hospitals, so I go to this private clinic run by an infectious disease specialist who agrees to see me by exception. But then she refers me to this friend of hers who works in a state hospital, who is an HIV specialist. I need to make my way into hospital, faking I was COVID positive, because the security people wouldn't understand and wouldn't let me in. Clinics at the hospital are like ghost town. All the doctors are up in the intensive care unit, caring for people about to die from COVID. And I'm really hoping this lady is gonna come down. She doesn't for the first hour. Then I find her nurse magically. I make them a phone call. She comes down and she sees me. She sees my fever, my swollen lymph nodes, the pictures of my bleeding gums. She hears about my story. She sees the public health confirmation test is pending. And then she commissions a test at that hospital, which is the first step to getting HIV medication through the state.
And did she have to do this unofficially, because actually the hospital should be doing nothing but managing COVID?
In a way, she had to. Not unofficially, but out of her personal time. Bless her, the moment she saw me, she was sleepless maybe for 1.5 nights. Like, she was like a zombie. But she was still non-judgmental. She listened to me carefully. Even like for 2 minutes, she was really attentive. And thanks to her, maybe I'm not severely damaged from HIV. And I could have access 2 weeks later to the medication. But by that point, I had this official letter saying I'm positive and the state could prescribe me the medication. It wouldn't have just been reimbursed by the state. So I asked for money from friends, which was around $500 for a month of treatment, my first bottle.
And did they know why?
Some of them. And I then have to convince a pharmacy saying, hey, here's the money and here's my prescription. In a week's time, you'll be reimbursed by the states. But I'm leaving you the money in case you don't want to trust me. But please, can you give me this medication without state reimbursement being in place? Because I'm so ill and physical pain. I go around 10 plus pharmacies trying to persuade them. There was a pharmacist. I think he was gay. We never had a conversation, but that was the first pharmacy who agreed to the deal I proposed, and they made me sign something saying they're gonna release my money back once the state reimburses them, and they gave me my first pills. I go to park, and I'm so eager to take that pill I fought a month to get my hands on. My sweats, my hopes, everything in that pill. I remember removing my mask. I take it, and then I just couldn't stop crying. That was a, cry of relief. And at that moment I thought really grateful for all the people and activists who took us to this point where I could trust my pill. Back then people couldn't even trust their medication. It had all other suite of side effects, unknowns, failures. So I was really diagnosed at this lucky moment in medical history.
And so what happens next?
Then I'm positive. I, of course, hide it from my parents. What is a ticking time bomb, though, is I'm 24 then, and in less than a year I'm gonna turn 25. And 25 is when you lose your parents' health insurance cover. So if I'm not working, I won't have access to free HIV medication. And remember, those pills, back then they costed, in Turkey, if you were to purchase them privately, $430 a month.
Fuck me, really?
And I'm an unemployed student who lost his job and plans due to pandemic, living with my parents. So then to me, the struggle is to get a job. But how do you get a job? You studied abroad. Your skills are living for the Turkish economy. And you're living in a pandemic. People are not hiring people. People are firing people.
And so you have this very difficult situation. Your health insurance upon which you rely getting your meds is about to fall down. What happens next?
Then I get my internship remotely because I cannot travel to its location. And it's an internship for 6 months without a promise for it being translated to a job offer or not. I of course work my ass off to prove and show and make myself useful. So I start saving money aggressively.
So you're saving money to save your life?
Exactly. On those months, my horizon was shrunk to being able to earn at least $400 a month to survive. I'm oscillating in between. I am in between the survival mode of $400 trying to find a job, but also my first full year with HIV and trying to make sense of what it means to my future, to my sense of identity, because I was not born positive, but I was born as a Kurd and gay. So reclaiming those parts of my identity maybe came to me more naturally because I knew I was gay and Kurd. But now you're given this new identity as a positive person. You don't know what it means. You need to experience through it. You're even forming an opinion of it in real time. And maybe that's why I'm still not out to my parents. I'm still learning what it means to me.
What do you think it does mean to be living with HIV?
I think nowadays it means gratefulness. It really reminds me of all these fights I had fought and came out of. Maybe with scars, maybe with defeats, I don't care the result, but the process, it reminds me of the process of being grateful for all the things that I thought was valuable to fight for myself. First coming out as a Kurd, then gay, then building a life abroad, having my financial freedom, building my career with health in place. I think every time I take my pill, those are distilled into that pill. That sense of achievement, struggle, hope, resilience. It gave me a lot of immunity. I say life immunity. HIV, it reminded me of all the things I'm capable of. I think what I find it difficult is when people want to make it part of my own identity, or just make my identity just about it. And you could say the same thing for being gay, you know, like being gay is only one of the adjectives you could use for me. Being Kurdish Turkish is only one of the adjectives. Living in London is only one of the adjectives. So there's nothing wrong, I think, individuals choosing which adjectives they want to use for themselves or be in touch privately. But I think if it's other is approaching you only from one lens, it can be restrictive. Nowadays though, because I'm still building a relationship with my own status and me being positive and not feeling ready to come out to my parents because they're still so processing me being gay, and in Turkey they're not surrounded by these type of discourse or conversations where it's normalized, celebrated, being positive. Maybe they're not even aware that a positive person can live a fulfilling life. So until that moment, the reason I am not readily disclosing is I think I need to meet the person and have a face-to-face conversation. I don't want to be dealing with remote hate or remote stigma.
And also stepping in there, from my perspective, I think my body is my own responsibility. I don't think my body is your responsibility. So I'm on PrEP, and that's how I take responsibility for my body. Added into that as well, the fact that you are on effective medication, you are undetectable, you cannot pass HIV on to anybody else. So therefore, I don't think you're in a situation where you need to feel obliged to share your status with anybody if you don't want. Because you're not a risk to anybody. When I talk about risk, I mean the risk of passing on HIV.
I don't have an issue sharing my status with people I meet on clubs or in person, but if a person also asks me on a dating app my status, I share, but I wouldn't readily start the conversation because I don't know if they're ready to listen or process or be open to be challenged. I think once I come out as positive to my friends and all family, I think I'm gonna be really public on dating apps about my status. Because then it liberates you, you know. You can choose if you want to take how they handle it or not. Then it becomes their problem if they have a problem me being positive or not.
Why did you share your status with me when there was no question about contraction for me, because you're undetectable and I'm on PrEP?
I think I shared because you were willing to get to know more about me. And I wanted to be honest with you that this is part of my identity. And sharing also helps me form a narrative and a relationship with my own status. I think I need to possess my status before I can make peace with it. Maybe sometimes you possess your identity by talking about it, by normalizing it, by being not afraid of it. To me, you felt safe to do this with, and you felt intrigued and motivated enough to show me the emotion that I think this type of conversation needs to have. And I also want to invite everyone who are positive and who are maybe going through the similar journey similar to mine, thinking when to share, who to share with. That takes time, but sharing can be a healing factor for people. I am healing from sharing it. It helps me normalize it. It helps me own my status.
If I remember correctly, I think that you shared your status with me after I sent you a rough cut of episode 1 of season 1 of the podcast.
And it touched me. You sharing it, then showing it, motivated me sharing it with you now. Sharing is powerful. Sharing is caring. That's why we form families, procreate children, make art. Like we share all the positives. And being positive is a positive story. It's not always about negative story. I'm grateful what HIV taught me.
What does HIV mean to you?
It means gratefulness. I am grateful that I've made it this far, and I can cherish appreciation and hope for my future. But also in the healthcare system, growing up as a Kurdish Turkish person, I had a complex relationship with the state, the instrument of state, how it's used for or against me.
For against you as a gay man or as a Kurdish person?
Both, really both. The first positive and grateful relationship that I formed with the Turkish state was when I was on my meds on a stable course, and I could go to this beautiful state hospital, get non-judgmental care and my treatment paid for. That day I appreciated what it means to have a state, because Turkey received many Syrian refugees from the devastating Syrian civil war, and everybody I think knows someone from Syria who knows what it means not to have a state, or not to have a basic sense of hope for predictable tomorrow. This is not to justify the presence of state or their policies, but even with a fundamental construct like state, which I had problems with, HIV put me in a positive relationship with. I saw it from a different dimension. I am now also seeing the medical establishment more positively. I'm now on a clinical trial for once weekly HIV pills. Now, you may argue this is another ploy by Big Pharma to keep innovating only enough to make the system paying for the innovation and make the generics redundant. But I really don't think that way. I think a system doesn't have to be 100% right or beneficial. But once you're in this mode of appreciation, you even see things from a more positive lens which you haven't seen. When I was first back in Turkey, I felt I had lost something. I had lost the freedom I fought for. I had lost the stability in the states I worked hard for. But now that I have HIV, and I'm trying to form more positive stuff with things that are in my life, I'm writing more in Turkish. I'm trying to maintain a positive relationship with my homeland, the language I learned to love and feel in. Growing up as a half Kurd, Turkish was a barbed wire area. Now I think with HIV I'm taking things for their positive value. Turkish offers me something beautiful, I will take it. The Turkish state offered me very important stability, which I took, and I'm still grateful for it. Same with HIV innovation. If they are offering me this once weekly pill that I can be part of developing, I'm going to take it. I think when I say gratefulness, this is about intentional positivity in your life.
One of the reasons that I wanted you to come on here as a guest is to get a sense of the international angle, because I think your story is a really curious intersectionality, because it's still a European story, but at the same time, it's because of the nature of some of your narrative, it's very close to the edge of what some of the experiences might be like if they don't have that state care, that state support. So much of your story is about you battling to be heard, battling to get support. I thought it was important to have you on because I think we need to be aware that the things that we have now are not guaranteed because we had them last week.
If something is given to you, it can be taken away from you, or circumstances can change. I think we should be hyper vigilant to that prospect. And as gay and positive people, we should not be taking this progress for granted. I often question if equality is the end point of our liberation struggle, and I don't think it is. Like generations before me, those who have lost loved ones to HIV, they should be really angry now hearing these complacent discussions. We live in a post-truth age. The truth doesn't matter, people want to believe what they want to believe, and I think this discourse is so important to keep alive.
So normally, Can, at this point in the podcast, I ask the guests to share somebody with us that they know who has died. And it's a moment of remembrance. Now, you're a very different generation from most of my guests, and wonderfully, you don't have somebody that you know who has died from living with HIV. So I suppose in a way I've got a slightly different question for you now. Do you feel an awareness, as somebody who is living with HIV, of the grief legacy from the years, from the decades behind you? And if so, how does that make you feel?
I still do feel it very viscerally. Because the very reason my appeals exist is because of and thanks to their death. I know it's a hard combination to say because of and thanks to, but the reality was this tough time in our modern life, and that failure to recommend HIV alone had to happen for me to be able to be sitting in front of right now, healthy, compliant, and no problems, being positive. So yes, I do feel it dearly and viscerally in me every day. And if I can commemorate anyone, I would like to actually commemorate people who couldn't have access to medication during COVID. Many people suffered from that. Every part of the world. In Africa, HIV access programs got disrupted. Now they are disbanded. Due to the US government's decision. We live in a more conflict-ridden world. Imagine a Ukrainian soldier fighting for his country, not having access to HIV medication due to the war. You could give many examples of conflict, poverty, and international disgrace. And it's still a truth that many people are dying of HIV.
So my final question to you, Can, is if you had to write a postcard to the world with a little message on the back, what would it say?
Peace. Full stop.
Before we started recording this, you talked to me about how you had 3 identities you had to come out about. And that really struck me. Maybe the perfect way for you to end this episode would be for you just to tell the world, what are these 3 identities that so much of the world has told you you should be ashamed of?
That I am a Kurdish Turkish person from Turkey. That I am gay. That I am HIV positive.
Can, thank you so much for sharing your story here on HIV The Morning After. It's been fantastic hearing a whole new dimension and a whole new angle.
Thank you.
If you were moved or informed by what you heard today, please help spread the word. Subscribe to HIV The Morning After and leave a rating and a review. It makes a huge difference in helping others to find it. Your support helps to amplify these experiences. If you'd like to get in touch, suggest a guest, or share your own thoughts, you can email me at hivthemorningafter@gmail.com. And remember, if you encounter HIV stigma in a bar, call it out. If you encounter it at work, call it out. If you encounter it online, call it out. Because if you don't, you're part of the problem. The theme tune is by Pauline Nidu at unstoppablemonsters.com. And many thanks to Murray Lang for his continued support. And thank you for listening. Join me next time for another important conversation on HIV The Morning After. I've been Dan Hall.